The ice shifts in the glass. You are 8 years old, sitting at a dinner table that was never designed for you. Not in the physical sense. Your chair is the right height, your plate is filled. But every other seat at this table belongs to someone who has already lived through the thing you are currently in the middle of. Someone with a profession, a mortgage, an opinion about something they read this morning that you lack both the context and the vocabulary to track. And you are expected to sit amongst it, still, attentive, unremarkable, like a small diplomat at a foreign summit you did not ask to attend. There is no other child at this table to catch your eye, no one to kick under the tablecloth when the conversation goes long, no one to exchange a glance with when an adult says something that lands slightly wrong in the room and you can feel the temperature shift by 2 degrees. There is only you, the low amber light overhead, the smell of something that has been cooking since mid-afternoon, and the soft, relentless machinery of adult conversation moving around you like weather you have not yet learnt to forecast. So you begin to watch. You learn which silences mean a topic is sensitive and which mean it is simply closed. You learn to read the difference between how one parent holds their glass when they are tired versus when they are still genuinely present. You learn that your continued welcome at this table depends on a specific, sustained attentiveness. Present without being demanding, engaged without requiring anything back. You are 8 years old, and you are already sitting an exam that most people do not attempt until they are well into their 30s. Society looks at the only child and lands quickly on a verdict. Spoiled, overindulged, a creature handed everything without contest, with no siblings to sand down the edges, no shared scarcity to build anything real from. That is not a diagnosis. That is a projection from people who have never had to be the single moving variable in a household built entirely around adults. The only child does not get an extended childhood. They get the exact opposite. And here is the paradox that follows them into every adult relationship they will ever attempt. The environment that made them so fluent around authority, calm when pressure rises, attuned to the room, the person that others instinctively hand a difficult situation to, is the exact same environment that quietly, structurally, ensured they would never fully trust that a peer relationship could hold their weight. They are perfectly comfortable being alone, and they are quietly, persistently terrified of ever being perceived as a burden. Those two things sound like separate problems. They are not. They are the same mechanism, facing in opposite directions. The name for what happens to the only child developmentally is the miniature adult protocol, not a clinical category. The precise description of a developmental fast track where the child's nervous system forcefully calibrates to the emotional frequency of people 30 years their senior, because those are the only people consistently in the room. The protocol runs completely and quietly. You learnt to read a room before you learnt long division. You became hypervigilant to the subtle shifts in your parents' emotional weather, because in a domestic triangle of 3, any change in atmosphere has nowhere to diffuse. There are no siblings absorbing part of the signal, the tension, the warmth, the quiet tightness after a hard day. All of it arrives at one address, and the occupant learnt very early that their primary job was to read it accurately. The only child does not register this as pressure, at least not consciously. They register it as information. They become extraordinarily skilled at extracting emotional signal from the environment, reading tone beneath the literal content of words, tracking inconsistencies in behaviour across time, anticipating need before it is expressed directly. By the time they reach adolescence, they are operating with a social and emotional intelligence that most adults are still actively developing. Except, and this is the specific thing nobody names, the miniature adult protocol does not develop their ability to navigate social equals. It develops their ability to navigate authority. The vertical relationship, where power is clear and the hierarchy gives the interaction a legible structure, becomes the relationship they are most naturally at home in. The manager, the senior colleague, the older client, the professor. These dynamics have rules. The only child knows those rules almost before anyone explains them. The horizontal relationship, Peers, where power is unspoken and negotiated continuously, where the emotional rules are entirely unwritten, where no single person holds formal authority. That terrain is foreign in a way the people around them almost never detect, because the only child learned to fake the horizontal relationship very early, and they became very good at it. Good enough that even people close to them rarely see the seam. What this looks like in practice is specific. In a group setting, the only child is present, engaged, often the most attentive listener in the room. They ask good questions. They remember details from conversations weeks earlier. They make other people feel genuinely seen. But privately, they are running a continuous assessment, tracking the relational structure of the group, identifying where actual power sits regardless of who is nominally in charge, calculating their position and what is expected of them. It reads as warmth. It is also, underneath, a navigational system searching for the vertical structure hidden inside every supposedly horizontal room. Most people assume the solution is simply exposure. Enough friendships, enough social experience, and the gap corrects itself eventually. But that assumption skips the mechanism entirely, the underlying wiring that determines whether any of that exposure takes hold at all. The human brain categorizes environments as safe or threatening based on one primary variable: predictability. In a household with siblings, unpredictability is constant but low stakes. A brother is loud for no reason. A sister takes your things and denies it. Rules shift depending on who is in what mood on a given afternoon. Across thousands of small, low-consequence interactions, the developing nervous system builds something essential: a tolerance threshold for relational chaos. It learns, below the level of conscious thought, that people can be erratic and the relationship holds anyway. That friction is not evidence of structural failure. That inconsistency is not the same as danger. In a household without siblings, that calibration never runs. The environment is quieter. The emotional weather is adult weather, slower to develop, internally coherent, but significantly more charged when it finally shifts. The only child becomes precise at reading high-quality signals in a low-noise environment. What they never practice is reading noise itself. Think of someone who has spent their entire formation period studying a single, highly calibrated instrument. They are exceptional at it. Every register, every subtle variation, every anomaly worth attending to, they notice all of it. Then they walk into a room where everyone is playing something different simultaneously and nobody is following any shared score. The problem is not their ability. The problem is that every hour of their practice prepared them for a context that looks almost nothing like the room they are now standing in. Adult peer relationships are almost entirely that second room. Group friendships, early stages of romantic relationships before the patterns settle, office dynamics with their shifting alliances and unspoken politics. These environments run on relational mess, on things unsaid, on shifts with no clear origin, on the kind of ambient social static that most people absorbed through sheer repetition at age 9 or 10 without ever consciously deciding to. To the only child's nervous system, that mess does not register as neutral background noise. It registers as unprocessed information demanding immediate interpretation. And the response, when your entire developmental history has been built around reading and managing the emotional environment, is to manage it, to quietly take hold of the variables, to engineer the situation back towards something legible. This is the precise reason the only child tends to structure their adult relationships with something approaching clinical attention. Not because they are selfish, not because they are controlling in any simple character flaw sense, but because their nervous system never developed any other mechanism for making a peer relationship feel safe enough to remain in. The clinical term for what underlies this is hypermentalising, an overcalibration of the brain's social prediction system, where the internal model of another person becomes more trusted than the actual, ongoing behaviour of that person in real time. You stop waiting to discover what someone will do. You already decided. You are responding to the constructed version of them rather than the one currently standing in front of you. This produces someone who is rarely genuinely surprised by people, who has an accuracy rate in social prediction that most people would find quietly remarkable, and who, without realizing the full shape of it, has been responding to a model of everyone around them for so long that several of those relationships are essentially very sophisticated conversations with a projection. That is impressive, and it is quite unsettling. And it is the last layer before the pattern either releases or compounds permanently. Right now, you are probably sitting with one of two reactions. Either this is arriving with a precision that feels slightly too accurate, like coordinates being read from a map of territory you assumed was entirely private. Or you are resistant. Your relationships are functional, your social life is real, and the portrait taking shape here belongs to someone more damaged than you are. Both of those are the same reaction. The only child is fluent in one social mode above almost all others: controlled presentation. You decide, with quiet consistency, what people are allowed to see. You are warm. You are genuinely curious. The quality of attention you bring to a real conversation is something most people find unexpectedly disarming, because almost nobody listens that way without performing it. You are capable of deep loyalty, and none of that is insincere. But running underneath it, on a parallel track, is a continuous editorial process, a filter checking on every loop whether what you are about to express will read as too much, whether the need you are considering voicing will shift the relational atmosphere into territory you cannot interpret in advance. And here is the fork. Two versions of the exact same wiring, two trajectories that diverge and keep moving apart. One version produces someone who is genuinely, uncomplicatedly self-sufficient, intellectually precise, comfortable with sustained solitude in a culture that has decided solitude is a symptom of something broken. These people build substantial things. They think in long, uninterrupted lines. They maintain a small number of relationships of unusually high quality, not because they were fortunate in who they found, but because they never diluted those relationships with proximity they did not choose or obligation they did not personally examine. Their self-sufficiency is not a wound, it is a working method. The other version produces someone who is technically surrounded by people and chronically unreached, who performs intimacy with genuine skill but rarely receives it on any terms they actually trust, who has become so reliably steady, so consistently the useful one, so expert at never placing weight on anyone else's structure, that the people in their life have simply never had the real opportunity to hold them up. And after enough years at that distance, both sides stop expecting it. The arrangement calcifies. The gap becomes the relationship. The gap between those two outcomes is not talent, not circumstance. It is one specific variable. Whether the only child eventually collects enough real, experiential evidence that a relationship can bear their actual weight without collapsing. Not their competence, their weight. The inconvenient parts. The needs that arrive without packaging, that don't translate into anything useful, that require something from the other person without offering anything back. The version of them that the editorial filter has been suppressing since they were 8 years old at that dinner table. Most only children never explicitly test this. The risk assessment runs faster than the intention. The filter closes before the moment fully opens. They remove the uncertainty by never placing the weight. And the years accumulate at a distance that was always meant to be temporary. Here is what resolves the paradox, and it resolves it exactly where the paradox was first introduced. The received verdict on the only child, spoiled, self-centered, over-resourced, unable to share, is precisely inverted. Their deepest structural difficulty is not an inability to function without other people. It is an inability to believe that functioning with other people is worth the cost of the exposure. Because they already proved they can do it alone. They proved it early, completely, and without being asked. They proved it at a dinner table full of adults at age 8, holding a performance that was warm and precise and required nothing back. They proved it every time they came home to a quiet house and found a way to register that as sufficiency rather than absence. The miniature adult protocol did not fail them. It worked exactly as the environment required. It produced someone fluent in expectation, precise in their reading of emotional terrain, capable of extraordinary self-regulation under pressure. The system ran correctly. The output was real. The cost was simply never included in the documentation. What the only child spends years working out, sometimes quietly across decades without ever attaching a name to the process, is that the self-sufficiency they built was an adaptation, a specific, rational response to a specific developmental environment, the right instrument for the dinner table of adults, for the domestic triangle where being the one who disrupted the balance meant standing as the most exposed person in the room with no one to absorb the fallout alongside them, for the childhood that asked them to be smaller than they were and older than they were simultaneously, and consistently rewarded them for managing both. The ones who eventually understand this clearly do not dismantle what they built. They do not become dependent or demonstrative in ways that sit false against everything they actually are. They do something considerably smaller and considerably harder. They stop treating their own needs as a liability on someone else's balance sheet. They start placing small amounts of weight on the people who remain standing. And what they find, slowly, often later than they expected, sometimes with a surprise that feels almost embarrassing given how straightforward it turns out to be, is that the people worth keeping were never as fragile as the 8-year-old at the adult table had every reason to believe. The child learnt to need nothing in a room full of people who could have handled it. The adult gets to find out what happens when they finally test that assumption. That is the whole work. And it was always smaller than it looked from the inside. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe for more Uncanny Psychology. What part of this video resonated most with you? What video would you like for us to make next? Let us know in the comments.